Welcome to Toys in the Hood, the Jordan sorcery your mother says we have at home. Today we're going to take a look at the Age of Sigmar, and we're exploring the real life, sort of serious origins of everyone's favourite space lizards, the Seraphon, or as us old world folks like to call them, Lizardmen. So we're going to be talking about dinosaurs, some ridiculous puns, sci-fi origins, and maybe a little bit of Transformers as well. So the reason I chose Lizardmen was actually as a vote. You guys chose it. I had a subscribers vote. The other choices were Chaos, Imperial Knights, Adeptus Mechanicus, and Seraphon and Lizardmen won out. So a mere 7 months after I said I'd do it, here is the video. Thank you very much. And we'll start by one of my all-time favourite Warhammer characters. Although by favourite, I mean my favourite name of any character ever. And that's Lord Croak. So here's the setup. The Slaan are these big frog-like creatures. Frogs, they croak. But if someone's croaked, they're dead. And Lord Croak is both a frog and he's dead. It's a brilliant, brilliant name. It's a really neat play on it. And somehow they make it work in the background. It's like Warhammer is at the point where having a dead frog lead your armies and be one of the most powerful magic users in the world. It doesn't seem that weird. Now, Lizardmen were about the very start of Warhammer. I remember first seeing them in the 3rd edition Warhammer Armies book, which is when I sort of got into it, which would have been the very early 90s. The Warhammer Armies book had literally all the lists for all the races in. You only needed the main book and this one book. Lizardmen at that point were mostly Slaan. So they kind of had an Aztec feel. You ended up with like bull warriors, jaguar warriors, but essentially all of these were armed frogs. They had a few lizardmen, and then they also had troglodytes. Troglodytes would really become croxigores, you know, these kind of big lizards. And troglodytes are also very much reminiscent of Dungeons and Dragons. I think they're always a recurring monster in there. In fact, I mean, lizardmen are also a fairly common thing in Dungeons and Dragons as well. You also had lobotomized human slaves. In fact, not just lobotomized human eunuch slaves. So they really had a bad run for it. And the Lizardmen would also ally with the now thankfully defunct Pygmies. Then in 5th edition, they got a lot more love and they became a much more developed army. They were one of the armies in the main set, along with Bretonnians, that was released in 2001. And when they got their own army book shortly after, it was chock full of puns. In 5th edition Warhammer, they gave us names like you had Itsy Bitsy, a skink character, Teeny Weeny, a skink prophet, Yellow Poker, which was a city name in Lustria, and Dot Bikini, the name of a sunken city name. Altogether, that gives us Itsy Bitsy, Teeny Weeny, Yellow Poker, Dot Bikini. Yeah, I mean, these early puns, they're great. They might not be the highbrow ones. But actually, at the beginning, Lizardmen lore was quite highbrow indeed. The Slaan, the creators of the Lizardmen, they come from a 1940 sci-fi novel by A. Van Vogt, and that's called Slaan. In there, the Slaan are evolved humans. They're named after their creator, Samuel Lan. And like our Slaan, they're also higher beings. They have psychic powers, they can read minds, they're super intelligent, and they have near limitless stamina. They have nerves of steel, a superior strength and speed. And then, when the Slaan are ill or seriously injured, they retreat into a healing stance, which is what happened to a lot of the Slaan in the old world. And that's why Lord Croak is, he's a corpse, but gradually healing. So really, really cool background there. Not sure at what point they go from being evolved humans to being frogs, but maybe that's just a bit of humour on the Warhammer creators' parts. Nowadays, they're no longer called Lizardmen for what I assume are various copyright reasons. They're now called Seraphon, which sounds like it should be more of a fancy angel name. Well, it kind of is and it kind of isn't. So Seraph, in biblical terms, is an angel, but in some cases it actually means serpent, especially in the Old Testament. So Games Workshop Seraphon have this cool kind of serpent-angel connection going on, just with a lot more teeth and Aztec-inspired armour. You think about it as well, I mean, these are almost angelic beings. They just don't look like what we imagine angels to look like. They do descend from the heaven. The Slaans have their warp gates where they can travel. And the Slaan were the creation forces in early Warhammer. So it works quite well as a sort of biblical analogy. And then this Aztec vibe gives us and Seraph, being Snake, gives us this kind of Quetzalcoatl vibe. You've got an Aztec god, a feathered serpent. So in a way, Seraphon taking angelic names, but then they dial it up to winged lizard levels. Seraphon isn't a new name to Warhammer either. The Dark Eldar leader's Malekith's dragon is called Seraphon, or was called Seraphon. In fact, Malekith himself wasn't that new to Warhammer. That was used by Marvel Comics before Games Workshop, and then before that it was used by, well, the Norse. Here's the really nerdy explanation. So Seraph, as mentioned before, comes from the word sarab. This word is usually used in the Bible to describe snakes, alongside the word nahash, which is a regular snake, and ether, which is a term exclusive to vipers and adders. In the ancient Middle East, snakes were associated with fire, as their venom has a burning sensation and sometimes results with mass necrosis that occurs as living tissues die, and possibly because snakes also depend on the sun to survive, being cold-blooded. They hibernate when the sun is too weak. Indeed, in some ways, snakes are really solar animals, being connected to resurrection also with their snake mods. There's then a strong contrast with the Asian, African, Australian associations of serpents, which associate them with water. Maybe because of all your crocodiles and your water snakes there. But the association with fire seems to have prevailed in Europe, as the elemental salamanders are fiery beings, but of course medieval dragons also breathe fire. So we have Mazda Mundi, the most powerful of the living Slaan, and his name likely comes from a fusion of real-world inspirations. Mazda is the name of an ancient Persian deity, Ahura Mazda, who symbolises wisdom and light, and then the suffix Mundi refers to the world, suggesting he is the bringer of enlightenment and order to the world. Again, that's quite highbrow. Compare that to some of the other early Lizardmen and their pun names. So we have Tic-Tac-Toe, we have Slack-Joe, which is basically Slack-Jaw, Lottle Bottle and Incy Wincy, and then Tequila. I've also already mentioned Teeny Weeny, who later becomes Tehen One, while the other characters pretty much disappear in the lore. I think possibly because it's a bit insensitive. A Workshop use loads of puns when they're doing Warhammer, and some of them could be quite witty, but when you suddenly take what is your South American race and you're just giving it pun names based on jokes about spirits, with tequila, or simple games like tic-tac-toe, there's a point where you maybe need to be a bit more serious. Looking at the unit names, you've got skinks, one of the mainstays of the army. They're little lizards. Skinks in real life are little lizards. It's a really rather nice name. It's really apt. It's really straightforward. There's croxigors. So ending a word with igors is a pretty common trope in Warhammer. I think it started with the beastmen in Warhammer first off. You had the bestigors, were kind of the stronger beastmen. But then you've now got pestigors, corngors, zarngors, slaangors. Thinking about it, slaangors would kind of work for lizardmen too. And then the crocs part, that's clearly named after the shoe. So if we look at the Crocs website, what does it tell us? Well, it tells us the company was given the name Crocs after the multi-environment, amphibious nature of crocodiles. Building momentum with a shoe unlike any other, Crocs provided consumers with an innovative, fun and comfortable footwear to be worn for a variety of lifestyle occasions. And obviously Crocs are named after crocodiles, so Croxigors are named after Crocs, the shoes, which are named after the crocodiles. Or maybe you can skip the middleman out, but yeah. We then have sauruses. Saurus is Greek for lizard. That gives us dinosaurs, in which case dino is Greek for terrible, saur being Greek for lizard, terrible lizards. There's a Saurus astrolith bearer. This is one of the newer units that's come about. Astra is Latin for star, lith is Latin for rock. They're made from celestite, which is meteors. Now, celestite would be, well, named after celestial, being of the heavens. So it's all tied together in the Saurus astrolith bearer. So you've got Saurus Old Blood. This works really well. You've got Saurus, which we already know is the mainstay of the armies, the Lizardmen. And then Old Blood. This works great as reptiles are cold-blooded. So Old Blood, just take away the C. Nice and easy. That was great. Now, Lizardmen have lots and lots of dinosaurs, and not just any dinosaurs. So before I get into all of their dinosaur types, a bit of Warhammer Transformers crossover trivia for you. So when we look at Lizardmen lore, we've got Krokgar. Krokgar rides Grimlock. Mazda Mundi rides a Stegodon called Zlag, and Tic-Tac-Toe rides a Pterodon called Zwoop. These names sound pretty random, but they're basically named after the Transformers Dinobots. So we've got Grimlock, the T-Rex, we've got Slag, the Triceratops, and we've got Swoop, who's the Pterodactyl. So you've got Lizardmen riding Dinobot-inspired creatures. It's basically a Saturday morning cartoon mashup. It's great. And then on to the dinosaurs themselves. So there's a couple of patterns here. Most of these use actual dinosaur names, which is pretty great. Dinosaurs are awesome. But of course you can't call Warhammer figures after real dinosaurs, and the reason for that is you can't trademark them, and therefore anyone can make them. So you sit there and you'd be like Master Mundi riding a Triceratops. Well, suddenly everyone is going to be able to make a Triceratops model with Frog on, and you've got a lot of competition. Now, Games Workshop has not just joined the FTSE 100 by allowing a lot of competition to happen. So they want to avoid that. I mean, God forbid, as well as miniatures companies making them, God forbid you go to the local museum and buy some toy dinosaurs and start playing with those. Everyone could have a Warhammer army for less than 20 quid. Although ironically, Warhammer 40,000, the first book there, Rogue Trader, that had dinosaurs in. And one of the points of having dinosaurs in was it allowed you to use your dinosaur toys when you played Warhammer 40,000. They wanted to make it easy to get models. They did a similar thing with, I think it's Crotalids in Warhammer 40,000, who were designed that you can use toy crocodiles to play with them. Boy, have the tables turned. First, we'll take a look at the first three dinosaurs that were introduced. So there's the Stegodon. The Stegodon, look at a Stegodon, it's clearly a Triceratops. However, well, a Stegodon is a type of extinct elephant, but I don't really think that's where the name... I think what they've done is they've taken the name Stegosaurus, and then they take the Iguanodon from there as well. So you've got a combination of a Stegosaurus and Iguanodon, gives you a Stegodon. Then there's a Carnosaur. So Carn is, well, it's the words derived from the same thing. It gives us carnivore. Vor, incidentally, being to devour. We see that in a lot of tyranids with like biovores who, well, the reverse, they spit biological stuff out, and pyrovores who spit fire. And then saur is dinosaur. You know, you've got a giant tyrannosaur. And so you're taking the carn, you're adding its saur, you've got a carnosaur. You've got the flying dinosaurs. These are called pterodons. In the real world, we have pterodactyls or we have pteranodons, or at least we used to, you know, back in the day. Here, pteron means wing. That's where you get it from. And then in the original army list, there used to be cold ones, and these were shared with the Dark Elves, which is pretty neat from a background, as basically, I mean, the old world is, well, the same as our world, and so the Dark Elves and Nagaroth is North America, and Lustria is essentially South America. So the idea that you've got cold ones being these creatures on the same continent makes sense. So Dark Elves and Lizardmen had cold ones. Cold ones, they're cold-blooded, it's easy. They don't seem to be a thing in the background anymore. I'm not sure if Dark Elves still use them, but Lizardmen certainly don't seem to. But the good news is we've got a load more dinosaurs. So we've got the Bastillodon. Now, this looks like an Ankylosaurus, which anyone knows is the best dinosaur. It's got an armoured shell, it's got a mace for a tail, it's a walking tank, it's brilliant. Bastille is French for fortress, so this dinosaur is a fortress. There's the Ripperdactyl. So rippers are another common thing in Warhammer. There's rippers in Tyranids, there's ripperjacks in Necromunda, and in the original Rogue Trader book there's Rippyfish, which I think is the only one of these that doesn't have a model. There's also Ripper Bolgrot in Blood Bowl, the big troll. So you've got a Ripperdactyl. A Ripperdactyl is a pterodactyl with teeth. So the Raptordon. Raptor means to take. We've got raptors are a bird of prey. But actually looking at these creatures, I think it's likely that it comes from velociraptors, as they're very similar creatures there. We then have troglodytes. So we already talked about troglodytes being in the early Warhammer lists. So a troglodyte is a human cave dweller. Troglodons, they live in caves. Troglodytes are also a creature from Dungeons & Dragons that live in caves and has a kind of lizardy look. But a lot of these just come from kind of general folklore. Agrodons are the new cold ones, basically, in Age of Sigmar. They're the fierce, they're the heavy cavalry of the Saurus armies. They're not feathered like the Raptordons are. They're fully scaled. They're violent murder machines that only the boldest and most skilled Saurus can tame. And the longer they remain in battle, the more their bloodlust flares up, which basically gives them more attacks with their claws and jaws as the battle goes on. And the Scar veterans also particularly like riding Agrodons. Now, for this one, agra probably comes from the word aggravated. So as these creatures get more aggravated, they become tougher and better in battle. And then our last one, the spawn of Chotek. So Chotek is one of the Lizardmen gods. It's got a very kind of Aztec sound to it. I've no idea really where it comes from, though. There's Sophie Chotek, who was the wife of Franz Ferdinand, whose assassination started the First World War. a lot of Warhammer designers are also historical gamers, so it sounds like the type of Easter egg they might throw in there. I'm not really sure how that links with with Lizardmen, other than the fact that it sounds a lot like the other gods. So that's pretty much me on Lizardmen. Thanks for listening. I'm Steve. This has been Toys in the Hood, and this has been my kind of dip into just some of the fun puns and things and the origins of Lizardmen. I make regular videos, or I will make regular videos next year. I've not been the best at it this year, and I'll be doing a lot more next year. So please like, subscribe, and if you've got any subjects you'd like me to cover, then give me a shout. Thanks ever so much for your time. Cheers.